Hey everybody, it's Lisa Seltover here. First of all, welcome. All right, so I need to make sure that my audio and visual is working. So please give me a hey there if you can hear me, because that's sort of important to get started here. So I know there's a little bit of a delay from when I speak, you guys hear, and then I can see your chat messages. So let's make sure that you guys can hear me, see me. Yes, excellent. All right, so for those of you that know me, I have this joke that me and technology are waging a secret war. And by the way, it's kicking my butt. So in case something happens, by the way, I have one of the fastest internet speeds possible. And the service that I'm using is meant to handle 5,000 attendees. So it's a big, big thing here. So if you're experiencing a problem, there's likely something that's going on your end. So here's what I suggest. Definitely try to shut down as many of those devices as you have at home so that the live feed that we have here will come across smooth. That will definitely help. If by some chance something happens on this end, this software has a wonderful reboot button. You guys don't have to do anything, and it literally keeps us all together, and we can stay together, and it just reboots the system. So if by some chance there's an issue, let me know. And like I said, I've got that handy emergency reboot button. So we should be good to go. All right. So tell me, where are you guys from? I've had a lot of people here. So excited. Greg, everything looks and sounds great. Thanks, Greg. Jackie, love the painting behind you. Thanks, Jackie. It was actually a judge's gift, and it's probably one of my favorites. Elaine, Frank, Kathleen, Michelle, Linda, Leslie, Susan. Oh my gosh. I know I've got people from, let's see, Austin, Texas, Hood River, Oregon. Dana, welcome. Kathleen from New York. Shauna, Indiana. Michelle from Boston, Diane, Tennessee. Oh my goodness, so many things coming in here. All right. So keep telling me where you're from because I just love this. Oh my gosh, there's a lot of you. This is exciting. All right, so let's go through a couple of things. First and foremost, I am so excited that you're here. One of the big things, I've obviously hit on one heck of a topic because over 1,500 people signed up for this webinar. So that's incredibly exciting. But that also tells me that weed polls are something that people have kind of a need for information on. So I'm so glad that you're here to join me, and thank you for allowing me to talk about a topic that I find near and dear. All right, so before we get started, let's go through a couple of housekeeping topics. First and foremost, take the next hour, turn off your phone, turn off your social media, really pay attention. I have a lot of information to go through, and I'm going to go through it as quickly as possible because there is, like I said, there's a ton of information on this. There is a private chat, by the way. I'm the only one that can see the chat. So, that kind of helps to keep the chatter down so you can focus on what you're looking at on the screen. And when it's time to ask questions, then you can ask that question privately without feeling like people are going to be pointing you out. So I'm the only one that can see the chat on that. Speaking of questions, here's what I'm going to ask because there's a lot of you on here and I won't be able to watch the rolling chat. If you have a question while I'm talking, go ahead, write that down on a piece of paper. I will stop at certain points and ask for questions. That will be your time to definitely put your question up there. This way I won't miss it. Okay, also the PDF document. I know a lot of people, the workbook, a lot of people weren't able to print that off because it has a lot of pictures and would use up a lot of toner. That's okay. I've got some slides on here that mirror what your PDF document looks like. Or if you want to print it off, you can actually go ahead and print it off on your printer in black and white also. Sometimes there's options to do that, which reminds me, I am going to go ahead. I know there is a way on here, as soon as I find it, for me to put the link up for that. Yeah, of course. Hey, like I said, me and technology here, files. Nope, nope, come on. Of course, my computer is being just a little funky here. All right, don't worry about that. I can get that to you later. All right, so a couple of different things here. Internet connection, polls. I've got a couple polls for you too. So I want to go ahead and start off with one, which is, where are you right now in your weed pull training? And I'll come back to the poll and I'll share the answers in just a bit. So go ahead, you should see the poll up in your chat. All right, last and not least, we have people who are from all different sides of the spectrum on what their weed pull experience is. So I've got brand new beginners who have never taught a dog to do the weaves, all the way up through master folks that have a ton of experience but want to know either some of the weed pull training method options or to get a better understanding of those different options. One of the first things I'm going to do is I'm going to go through some basic information just to make sure we're all on the same page. And going through this information, once I get into the methods, it's going to be more clear why I reviewed that. That'll take just a few moments. So for those of you that may know this beginning information, remember we've got some new folks who are brand new, and I definitely want to be able to see exactly where they're at in their training. All right, guys. I am going to go ahead and I'm going to share screen here so that you can see what I've got going on. All righty. So first and foremost, can you see the graphic on the screen right now? And of course, me down in the little corner. Let me know. So before I get started, I know that you are seeing exactly what it is that I'm seeing. Go ahead, let me know in that chat box. I've got a couple from, oh my gosh, all the people coming in. This is amazing. I've still got tons of information here. So let me know, can you see that screen? Oh, my chat is going so fast. Yes, 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 yes. Okay, excellent. Thanks, everybody. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started with the presentation. By the way, I am going to be looking at notes at this time, and it's not because I don't know what I'm talking about. It's because I love this subject so much. I've got my notes to keep me on topic. So just an FYI. All right, let's go ahead and get started here. All right, so first of all, for those of you I haven't had a chance to meet yet, my name is Lisa Seltover, and I've been judging and training in dog agility for multiple decades now, literally decades, going on 3 decades as a matter of fact. And to say that I love weed pull training is an understatement. The reason I love it so much is because I've really had an opportunity to train well over 1,000 dogs and really dive into the nitty-gritty detail of what makes for good weed pull performances. The other thing is the advantage of judging and traveling worldwide is that I've had an opportunity to talk with a lot of people who have amazing weed pulls. Plus, when you're judging, you literally watch, I think at last count, I've probably watched over 120,000 dog agility runs. You really get to see what beautiful weed pulls look like. And so I'm about to share with you all of the fun information that I have gleaned over the years. And probably one of the biggest things that I want to start off with is weed pull methods. The reason that there are 8 weed pull methods, technically 9, and I'll get into all of those, is because it isn't a one size fits all. And there's quite a few things to go through that. And I think that's part of the reason people have so many questions about weed pulls. It's because between you being an individual human and your dog being an individual dog, and the two of you coming together, things have to really click. And it won't click with all methods. So that's why I'm doing this training. Okay, so first and foremost, here's what you need to know about the physical weave pull obstacle. You're either going to see a minimum of 6 pulls or a maximum of 12 pulls. And the spacing in between those poles is 24 inches. The reason I'm sharing this is because at some point you may have to set up your own homemade poles. And I just want to make sure that everybody has an understanding of what the physical characteristics of the weave pole obstacle is. Also, a pro tip, if I have a choice between training on 6 or 12 poles, I will always train on 12 poles first, right? Why go to 6 and then have to kind of, amp up from there? Just go straight to 12. All right, so here's kind of a bigger picture for those of you that weren't able to download that PDF. Like I said, a minimum of 6 poles, a maximum of 12 poles, and the spacing is 24. Also, for those of you that may be new to agility, this graphic is from what they call a course designer program. And eventually you'll see course maps. And this is what the weave poles look like on the course maps, the either 6 or the 12. All right, so let's talk about the overview of the weave poles themselves. First and foremost, the dog always enters on the same side. So when you're looking at the weave poles from the dog's point of view, that left shoulder is what's hitting the weave pole first. So they're going from the right to their left. Also, the dog will always exit on the left, right? And that's the pro tip. So as a judge, when I'm looking at a dog who's weaving either 6 or 12 poles, one of the things that I'm watching for is how the dog exits. You as a handler, that's another way for you to check to see if perhaps maybe your dog had skipped a pole in the middle, because believe me, some of these dogs are pretty quick at doing that. So remember, a dog always exits on the left. All right, next, weave pole training goals. When I'm looking at the weave pole obstacle, I tend to divide this into 3 sections. There is the entry part of the weave poles. There's the middle part of the weave poles where the dog is actually doing the weaving action itself. And then there's the exit, or the last part of the weave poles. I'm going to go through all 3 of those, and we're going to talk about why all 3 are very important when choosing a weave pole method to use for training. All right, so weave pole entries. Let's talk about that section first. So here's what you need to know. Like I mentioned just a little bit ago, the dog always enters the weave poles going from the right to the left, or another way to think about it is with their left shoulder brushing up against that first pole. All right. Also, there are 2 types of entries. So looking at the picture in the middle of the screen there, that is what we call an onside weave entry. The reason it's called an onside weave entry is the dog can enter the poles a bit more easily because they're on the correct side to be able to enter those poles. And as you can see from all of the different lines that are there, you're going to want to train your dog so that they can enter the poles from all of those different directions. Going to the picture on the far right, that's called the offside weave entry. The reason it's called the offside weave entry is the dog is not on the side of the weave pole entry, they're on the offside, so they have to work their way around to that onside. And again, your dog should be able to hit the weave entry from all of those different angles. All right, so let's talk about how dogs weave, the physical effort. All right, so starting with the top left picture. When we think of weaving, generally we think of the dog moving back and forth, right? Moving from left to right. What allows the dog to move from left to right is 2 things. First of all, the footwork, right? That's going to be one of the most important things. It's really the feet that get the dog from the left to the right and vice versa. Also, I'd like to have a dog's head down lower, and I'm going to go through that. So talking with the first picture in the upper left, that is what we call a single stride. So what's happening is the dog is using one leg to push off to get to the other side of the weave poles. Then when they get to the other side of the weave poles, they're using the other single leg to push off and to go back and forth. That is probably the most efficient weave pull method, just so you know. I should say the most efficient weave pull stride. That's the stride that most people want to go for. Now, it doesn't necessarily make a difference what stride your dog has or what type of stride your dog has. They're all going to work. But if you're going to go for efficiency, sometimes that's the area that you want to try to go for, is that single stride. Now, the next stride is what I call a double stride. So what's happening in the top middle picture, the dog is actually pushing off with both feet, okay? And that's called a double stride. The third picture, the upper right, now this is generally for smaller dogs. They're just going to have multiple steps in between each of the weave poles. Remember how I mentioned that there's 24 inches between the weave poles? Well, smaller dogs aren't able to single or double stride sometimes, so they have to take multiple steps. That's just how they are, how it works for them physically. All right, bottom left. This stride, and I didn't have a picture of it, but it's when dogs inadvertently cross their paws. So what happens is, as they're crossing the weave pole, they're putting the opposite foot down and then crossing over with the other foot to get them back. This usually occurs in young dogs who aren't experienced in weave poles or are just learning how to maneuver through the weave poles. At this point, they're just getting themselves back and forth, and they haven't come up with an efficient footwork yet. All right, the bottom picture, this is a dog who very much does what I call a hop. So they have a hop stride. So their stride is more up and down versus left to right. They generally have their head high up, and oftentimes they are so excited they will literally bounce themselves out of the weave poles. So I call this the hop stride. Last but not least, some dogs will actually combine two different strides. So on the bottom right, this is actually a border collie that I own, Spot, and he used to, on one side, do a single stride, and on the other, do a double stride. Now, that's just kind of how he physically maneuvered those poles. And quite frankly, he was very fast at it. And it wasn't until I saw a series of pictures that I realized what he was doing. So like I said, the most efficient method would be the single stride and working to keep your dog's head down. All right, so let's go on to the next slide here. All right, so let's talk about the exit and the exit with success. So here is what leads to a successful completion of the weave poles. Picture number one, first and foremost, you want a dog who is looking down toward the horizon. So they're not looking at just the weave pole that's right in front of them. They're looking down the line toward the end of that 12th pole. Second, the middle picture, you really want a dog that can work independently from the handler. So in the middle picture, I'm actually sending my dog Zulu down through the poles, and I'm not a part of that weave pole performance. So you want a dog who can independently drive on through to the end. The last picture talks about rewards, right? So while a reward is important, a reward down at the end of the weave poles, the placement of that reward is equally as important. So in this case, you'll either have a dog that's food motivated or toy motivated. You can use both. And what you want them to do is, as they're driving down, you want to reward that by making sure the reward is down ahead of them past the poles. This way, they're focusing on down toward the reward, down toward the horizon, and not looking at you, the handler. One of the things that you really want to do, and this is your pro tip, is create independent weave pull performance. That means that you as a handler have nothing to do with it. You're actually training the dog to do the weaves on their own. and let's go ahead and go through the weed pull methods here because it may actually answer your question. All right, so first method. This method is what I call the push-pull method or luring, right? And I would say that this is probably the original weed pull training method. Basically, in terms of equipment, all it takes is straight up weed poles and a treat. This is ideal for and mainly used by handlers who are brand new to agility and have no dog training experience. Now, I'm not necessarily sure that this method is ideal for anyone, and as soon as I go through the cons, you'll understand why. All right, so here's what happens with the push-pull or the luring method. Basically, it creates a dog that is 100% dependent on the handler because the handler is either using their hand or their body to get the dog to weave back and forth. So they're either using their hand by saying, by pushing them out, bringing them in, pushing them out, bringing them in, or there's something that we call the weave pull dance, where the feet, you're literally taking a step in toward the poles to get the dogs to push out, taking a step back to pull the dog back in. The pros on this, well, it requires very little dog training because the handler is taking 100% of the responsibility to get the dog through the weed poles. The cons on this, well, this method truly doesn't hold up or maintain as time goes on. So as dogs get faster, as the courses get tougher, this weed pull method really breaks down rather fast because what happens is it's dependent on the handler being at exactly the right place at exactly the right time. And that is a really hard criteria as a handler to live up to. Basically, it doesn't teach independent weave entries. It doesn't teach independent weaving, and it most definitely doesn't teach speed and the footwork and the drive down to the end of the weaves. So while this is definitely a method, I would say that it's not exactly one of those areas that I would suggest this method. A lot of times people suggest this method because they think that they're not going to go on with their weed pull training and they just want to get through those first 6 novice pulls, but it's a very short-sighted training method. So yeah, that's definitely something that I would not consider. It's not my favorite. Okay, so the next one, this is what I call shaping or clicker method. And basically it uses straight up weed pulls and a marker word or a clicker. And it's ideal for those who like to free shape behaviors and are experienced in clicker training, right? So this literally free shapes the dog to weave back and forth through the poles. The pros, well, the dogs definitely learn to negotiate the obstacle independently. The cons, however, is as a handler, you have to have a really good understanding of shaping behaviors, developing behaviors, and getting them to move forward. Also, your timing has to be really good, and the placement of your reward must be spot on. Also, I don't think that this method teaches footwork necessarily, so that's something to also consider. It's not a very popular method, although those that love shaping, they do love the challenge of this. All right, next. This is called the Weave-O-Matic or Vset method. And the equipment that it requires, straight up weave pulls that can bend into a V. Now, this is ideal for all levels, and it really does. I think this is an excellent method for teaching the dog footwork. I think by far, dogs that don't understand that single striding, this method is wonderful for that. Now, it also teaches speed and, if done properly, to drive down to the end. The other nice part is because those weaves are in a V set, it really does prevent the handlers from jumping in and being part of that obstacle performance. The cons. Basically, you need some special equipment, which either are some knuckles that go onto regular weed poles. So the knuckles go on the base of the weed pole so that you can bend then, or create that bend that you see in this picture. This can also be a challenge for small dogs because of that knuckle, which tends to be about 4 to 6 inches tall. If you've got a small dog, they're not necessarily seeing that V because it could be up above where their eyes are naturally landing. But like I said, this method can be really nice, especially for teaching, footwork. All right, the next method. So this method is called the channel method. And the reason I use this picture is if you look straight down, you can see there's poles on the left, there's poles on the right, and the dog is coming down the middle. So I want you to think about this as like an alley or kind of a gutter that literally it creates this channel down the middle, and the dogs learn to drive down, and then you slowly start to pull the poles in so that they become closer and closer to the dog until they actually line up in a straight line. This method is definitely ideal for all levels. And in terms of equipment, you definitely need to have weed poles that can split to create a channel. This teaches footwork, speed to drive down to the end, and also it keeps the handler out of the obstacle performance. The cons, it requires special weed pole equipment. That would be the big thing. All right, the next method. This is called the guide wire method. And in terms of equipment, all you need are regular weed poles and guide wires. So the guide wires actually go on every other pole. And what they do is, as you can see from this picture, from the dog's point of view, they're entering from the right to the left or grazing that left shoulder on that right pole. And what it does is the channel or guide wires, the guide wires here, 100% keep the dog in so that they're automatically learning that left to right part. So it's helping to guide them from the left side of the weed pole to the right side, to the left side, to the right side. Now, what I like about this is it introduces the dogs to the weave path immediately, that left to right. It addresses training the weave entry portion because the dog would have to work pretty hard to get an incorrect entry with this. And it encourages them to continue down the exit. And it also, because of the way the guide wires are, it keeps handlers out of the way. Some of the cons. Well, it does require some special weed pole equipment, which are the guide wires. And the height of the guide wire is set differently for every single dog. So if you've got dogs in class, you may have to adjust the height of those wires for each dog that goes through. Also, some dogs tend to look at this as an obstacle, look at the guide wire itself as an obstacle in and of itself. So sometimes they'll duck under it, sometimes they'll jump over it. Some dogs don't like to feel enclosed and just try to avoid that. So that's, something to kind of think about. Also, I don't think it necessarily teaches footwork or speed. I think that comes from the handler encouraging the dog down to the end of it. But the guide wires definitely have their place, and we're going to talk about that later. All right, this method is called the gate or fence method. And what I've done here is I just took 2 X-Pen panels and used those. It's similar to the guide wires, except it doesn't enclose the dog all the way. So equipment, you just use regular weed poles and either X-Pens, or some people use garden fencing, right? So this method can be, in terms of equipment, a bit less expensive than some of the other methods because you may have some of this equipment at home. This is ideal for all levels. However, I think it's best used for problem solving versus actually teaching the dog to weave. All right, the pros, basically, It teaches the dog the proper entry. The gates and fence can be expensive, and and handlers already have. Plus, it also keeps the handlers out of the obstacle performance. In terms of cons, it does require some special equipment. Also, you have to know when to move the gate at the third or first pull. And here's why. Remember when I talked about that onside weave entry versus the offside weave entry? The gates in the picture right now are set up for a dog who's approaching the weave pulls from the onside entry, okay? If the dog were approaching from the offside weave entry, you'd have to add another pull to the first, you'd have to add another fence or gating to that first pull. So there is a bit of technicality there that you have to be aware, and it does require you to do a bit of adjustment, especially if you're just using 2 of the fences or gates. If you have more than 2, then it won't be a problem. All right, next. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the 2x2 method, and I want to be clear about something. There are 2 versions of the 2x2 method, right? So when people say, hey, I taught my dog 2x2s, just understand there are 2 different methods. So let's first of all talk about what they have in common. And I'm going to go through both of those just so you know. So I call this the original method. And they basically, let's talk about what they have in common. So 2x2 weave pull sections. So these are special bases, and what they do is they divide the weave pulls so that there's just 2 per base, okay? Basically, this is ideal for all levels if you understand the method, and I'll explain that in just a little bit. All right, so here's an overview of both 2x2 methods. Here's what they have in common. So both methods teach the dog by introducing one set of 2 weave pulls at a time. So there would be, for example, just one of the yellow sets would be used first. Both methods start off with and address the weave entry. So what they do is they use just 2 poles, and they teach the dog to find the correct weave entry from all angles. So immediately they're just using 2 poles to teach the dog to correctly go between those 2 poles from both the onside weave entry and the offside weave entry. So where the method then differs is as you start to add in a second or a third set of 2 poles, that's where the difference comes into play. In this original method, they use what I call an angle approach. So when they're introducing a second set of weave pulls, first they turn it so it looks like the channel method. So what they do is they have 2 poles that are parallel, and when the dog is looking down, it looks just like the channel method. Then what they do is slowly start to rotate both set of poles at the exact same angle at the exact same time so that eventually they will line up to be 4 poles straight in a row. Okay, and then eventually they'll add in the third set, etc., etc. Now, as you've noticed, I've already gone into a longer explanation on this than I have in some of the other methods. That's what one of the cons is you have to understand how to do this method. And it's one of those where you either understand it or you don't understand it. And if you understand it, you're going to likely have great success. However, if you don't understand it, you're likely not going to have as much success. But it's a great method for those that do, and for those that don't, it can be confusing. All right, so the pros on this method, it teaches the dog about entries, independent weaving, and about driving down to the end. Plus, it also keeps the handler out of the obstacle performance. So there are definitely some pros on that. Some cons, it requires special weave pull equipment, the 2x2s. And like I mentioned, an understanding of the method, plus properly being able to reward in a timely manner, and also the placement of the reward is very important. Like I've said before, dogs and handlers either understand this method or they don't. All right, so let's go to the sister 2x2 method, and I call this the revised method or the straight line 2x2 method. So it goes about things the exact same way, except once they start introducing more than one set of poles, what they do is they just stretch out that straight line. So I want you to think about this as you've got 4 weed poles with 2 sets of 2, and all you're doing is stretching it out. So for example, when they start to incorporate multiple poles, they'll put about 6 feet in between the 2 sets of poles, right? And then eventually they'll start to lessen the actual length between the poles. So once the dog is doing the first set and the second set, what they'll do is they'll go from 6 feet, say to 5 feet, then 4, then 3, then 2, and then until they're all the way to, together, which is at 24 inches. I tend to like this method because for me personally, it's easy to understand. I don't have to worry about rotating poles. And for me, it creates a consistency for the dog, which is enter correctly. Oh, wait, enter correctly again, enter correctly again. And I tend to like that nice, easy pattern. That seems to be good for everybody involved in that one. Okay, the next method. All right, this is the combination method. And this is where you put multiple training methods together, and basically equipment, your choice. So in this case, I have the channels and the guide wires on there. And by the way, this is the method that I happen to use. I think most people, once they've had some experience with weed poles, this is what they tend to do. They tend to take the best of a couple of different weed pole training methods and put them together. So I'm just going to use what's on the picture, which is the channel and the guide wire, as an example. So the reason that I like this method is it teaches my dogs speed and it teaches to drive them down. Also, because I've got the guide wires on there, I'm working those independent entries, and the guide wires are keeping me out of the picture. The guide wires really come into play as I'm starting to pull those channel weaves closer and closer together, so that I'm making the channel smaller and smaller until at some point those weave pulls line up in a straight line. Once they line up in a straight line, then I've got the guide wires, which are a signal to my dog to continue to remain in the poles and drive on down. To answer the big question that many people have asked, I buy all of my equipment, my weed pole stuff, from Max 200. So max200.com. All right, one more thing, you guys, and I'm going to keep answering questions. I just want to put this out there because this is really great stuff. So I am so excited to I want to keep talking about this. Clearly, we have hundreds of questions here, and I want to answer them. But I also want to help each of you individually. So there's so much more detail that I want to cover. And when it comes to the weed poles, I definitely want to offer you guys a way for us to continue this conversation together, and for each of you to get instruction on all of the different main weed pole training methods. In other words, me showing you via video exactly how to train each of the main methods. So I'm talking about the channels, the guides, the Vsets, all of that. And for those of you that don't have weed poles at home, there are definitely foundation exercises that you can do to prepare your dog for weed poles. I'd like to show you all of that as well. And for those that currently their dogs are weaving, but they have issues, you know what? I'm going to pick videos and I'm going to show you how to solve that. Chances are that if I don't pick your video, the person whose video I do pick is going to have similar issues to you. Plus, I also want to go ahead and do some live Q&As so that all of the questions that I'm getting today, I can answer all of those every single week. This is really a great time to make progress and tackle the toughest agility obstacle, which is the weed poles, and for us to keep up the momentum that we've created here today. So basically what I'm doing is I'm offering my of weed pole knowledge and training in an interactive Facebook group, right? And so here's what you can expect. I'm calling it an interactive group coaching experience. I'm going to do how-to tutorials on the 2x2s, the channels, wires, V-sets, and the Weave-O-Matics. I'm going to do foundation exercises, and this is great for even dogs that are currently weaving. So for example, someone said, hey, my dog looks to me for the reward. I've got some foundation exercises you can do at home without weed poles that are going to help and that will transfer over into the weed poles. Also, like I said, I'm going to pick some videos and do weed pole analysis so that we can work on all of these issues together. Plus, I'm also going to talk about, give you some insight on the common weed pole issues, how to avoid them, right? That's going to be a really important thing, like when your dog pops out or they're not following through all the way to the end. And I'm also going to give you some training sequences and also talk about how to get those weave entries on course. So for those of you that currently do have weave poles and are looking for some challenges, yeah, I've got some really good ones for you. And of course, I'm going to do a special on training just weed pole entries. And this applies to everybody. And you should be starting this now, even when you're in the beginning of your weed pole training. So basically, this training starts April 1st, and all training will be hosted on a private Facebook group. So we will be incredibly interactive. You can go ahead, you should actually see right there, you can go ahead and sign up now. And in the meantime, what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep answering these questions. All right, questions, and I'm sure you have a lot of them. And I definitely did see some questions. Okay, so let's see. I may go out of order on this one. So Martin asks, what's the main reason for 12 poles to start with? Well, if you're going to put some effort into training the poles, you might as well just go straight to 12 and back chain. So if you can teach a dog to do 6, you can definitely teach a dog to do 12. I say start with 12 because it's easy for the dog, and it's easy for the dog to adjust. Plus, if they always know that in their lifetime there's 12 poles, they're always going to be looking for 12 poles. And I think that that becomes an advantage as you start to move up in, from novice into intermediate, for example. This way you don't have to worry of, oh my gosh, I've only taught 6. I wonder if my dog can do 12. Just go straight to the 12. All right, I see lots of questions, so I'm going to try and get to all of these things. So someone asked, what about throwing food at the end? And that's definitely what I do. So by the way, Chinese food containers are my absolute favorite. So I use the little ones that gravy comes in, and I'll tend to put food in there, and I'll race my dog down to that food or once they get there. So food is great. The other thing that a friend of mine just introduced me to, it is called a lotus ball, and it opens up with Velcro. You can put food in it and then close it. You can use that to throw down, and the dogs are able to stick their nose in there and open up that lotus ball. So that's probably one of my favorite toys now. Let's see. Val says, my instructor is having us throw a treat between the first and second poles. She says it's to get them to slow down on the entry. Not sure I agree. So Val, I'm just going to tell you what I think. I think that the dogs should slow down just before the weed poles and not while they're in the weed poles. So when I say to my dogs weave, I expect them to drive to the weed poles, pull up right before they start their action, and then begin their weave action. So you want to make sure that all of your, everything that you're doing and rewarding is helping that. Okay, let's see here. What about the new colored poles? You know what? I teach my dog on all sorts of colored poles. I teach him on I actually have 4 different colors, by the way, and I don't put them in pretty areas. I mix and match them. And I also have stripe poles. I think that the actual color of the poles, I want to train my dog and prepare my dog for that. So that's what I do. All right, Jeff, my dog weaves, but does the slow, but does it slow. How do I speed her up? I would definitely probably go back to one of these training methods. I think that, for example, either the channel or the Weave-O-Matics, something that you can open up those poles just a little bit, take off some of that weaving pressure to just address the speed part of it. That's what I would be doing. Holy cow, you guys have a lot of questions. I love it. What age do you teach weave training? So interestingly, Kim, I actually teach my dogs as puppies. I start with skills. There are no weave poles involved, but one of the things I want them to do is I want them to be able to physically be able to bend and maneuver. So I have some foundation stretching exercises that I do, but I also want them to learn to drive forward beyond me and to go down toward the horizon for a treat. So I start with foundation exercises that handle that. Let's see, Diane, do you think you can change a dog from double striding to single striding by changing the method? Absolutely. I've seen it. I've done it. You have to, work, and you have to make it fun, and you really have to encourage them. But dogs generally do it very well, unless there's a physical reason that they're choosing the double stride. Just an FYI on that one. Okay, where you can buy the knuckles for the Weave-O-Matics. Kim, I'm going to answer that question right in the end. Perfect. Let's see. Can you modify regular competition weaves to be channel weaves? I don't know of a way that you can do that, Kim. I truly don't know of a way. I think you need to have special poles or go to stick in the ground poles, right? That's another cheaper option. Can 2x2s work with stick in the ground weave poles? Paige, yes, they can. Absolutely. Where do you purchase guide wires from? Monica, I promise I'll answer that question at the end. I'm going to tell you who I buy all my equipment from. And I've also got a nice 10% discount for you guys to share with their permission. Let's see here. Sorry. What are the cons of the combination? The only con is not finding the right combination, but the truth of the matter is then you just switch to something else, but give it a shot at that point. I actually think I see very little cons in using multiple methods. I see more of a con by sticking with one method, and if it's not working for your dog, you're not getting the results, not adding something in or changing. How do you get them to lower their head? Diane, that's a great question. There's 2 things that I do on that. Number 1, I really get them to drive down toward the horizon, and that seems to really help. Also, a dog that's focused and really thinking about their footwork, it seems to be a natural with that. But that's also the reason, by the way, that I'm not a fan of the luring method, because you're usually up higher than your dog, and that creates a dog that's looking up. That's another reason I'm not a fan of that method. Laura, is one of the 2x2 methods easier for most dogs to learn? I think it has to do with what the handler understands, because I have seen great results with both of them. Like I said, for me personally, the straight line method makes a lot more sense to me. But I have to tell you, I've actually tried both methods with a couple of different my own dogs. And on my own dogs, it didn't work so well. As a matter of fact, I tried one of the methods for 3 weeks. And when I went to both the channels and the wires, I had weave poles in less than 1 week. So I really tried working that one out. So that's part of the reason I also think that if if something isn't working, it's time to switch. And in this case, I had dogs that were thinkers, and it just wasn't a good method choice. They were way overthinking everything. Pam, how do I move from a dog that knows push-pull method to independent? I would probably go with a different method. So either go with the channels, Go with the guide wires might be another method to choose with that one, or the fence method, or the Vsets. In other words, make it so that they're not looking at you. And what I would do is I would start at the end of the pole. So start with just a couple, have something down at the horizon that they can look at, and then you can, kind of go from there. Let's see here. Oh gosh, I'm sorry. The questions are coming in so fast. Actually, I'm not sorry about that, by the way. Is there a time to switch between methods? Yeah, when it's not working. So I literally just got done sharing a story with you where, it just wasn't working for me. And I tried for 3 weeks. You know what? I tried. It wasn't, and I was getting frustrated. The minute you start to get frustrated, you might want to think about something else. You either don't understand the method and it's time to ask for help, or you do understand it and it's time to switch. Hey, Anne, do you find one method works better for tiny toy dogs over medium to large dogs? So for tiny dogs, I think the Vsets are not a great option. I like the channel method. For small dogs, I think that it really gets them driving forward. The other thing is I also do like the guide wires for tiny dogs, especially because those tiny dogs have to take multiple steps in between. So sometimes it's not that they can't weave. It's just they have to put a bit more effort forward to that. So I would definitely first think about wanting to get them to go driving down to the end, and then I would definitely be adding something in there to keep them in there and encourage them on their own. What age do I start training weaves? I start with foundation work, which does not require weave pulls, the minute my dog comes home. Brenda, do you start removing a guide wire here and there as time goes by? Actually, Brenda, what I end up doing with the guide wires is I start to take the middle section, and by the way, I have to give a shout out on this one because the person that gave me this information is Ann Brow, who is part of the AKC World Team Coach, and she's brilliant on this. What she does and what she suggested to me, and which I do as well, is I start to take those middle wires and I start to pull them upward. So that's how I actually start to fade them. So I start to bring those middle wires up, and that's how I start to fade the wires, just as an FYI. Let's see. Let's see, my dog tends to slow down in the poles waiting for the reward. Yeah, that's called placement of the reward. So what that means is you probably give the reward from your hand. You need to get that reward placement down at the end. Just an FYI. Melinda, the lotus ball is fabulous. Yes, it is, right? Joan, love the lotus ball. Yeah, absolutely. It's a great. Yeah, the lotus ball is wonderful, you guys, and you can get it on Amazon as well. Do you put the reward at the end before you send the dog, or throw it while you run with them? It will often depend on the dog and what it is that I'm actually trying to accomplish there. So what I actually do is I often throw it for my dogs, but sometimes in the beginning, I have to put it down there to get my dog to target. So it just depends on the dog. Best method for starting a puppy, too young to weave much. I would say the channel method, right? So you can get the dog used to channels being on its right and its left and just drives right on down. You can get them to the point where they're just barely touching the puppy. So they're still going straight down, and then wait until your puppy actually grows. That's probably one of my favorite methods, and then, that kind of helps that way. So I love this. Sue says, I have 2x2s, guide wires, and gates for training, right? So yeah, Sue's definitely using multiple methods. How do you train slowing down in the entry? I have a big dog and she goes in fast, so she pops out at pole 2 and 3 and then corrects herself. Vanessa, I like the gate method for that, actually. I think that really teaches a dog to kind of slow up right at the beginning. I've got a couple Dobermans I've used that with, and it has helped tremendously. The other thing you may want to consider is guide wires. But what I would do is I would try the gate method first, because you likely have some X-Pen panels that you can use and you don't have to go out and buy something. Kathy, my dog will pop out around pole 10. Tips for keeping him in. Guides on the last pole are great. You could also use the fences on that one. Arlene, my dog is very fast on the poles, but frequently misses the first. So you need... Arlene, you need to be working those weed pole entries. And in the 30 days of weed pole training, I have a ton of exercises that are specific toward working those weed pole entries. Let's see, Susan, my girl was fabulous at home and in class, but breaks during trials. So I'm guessing she's just really excited. And honestly, you may be too. So take a deep breath. Say weave, and I would start videoing yourself at home and in training and at trials to see if you're doing something different. That usually is one of the signs. Melinda, what do you think is best for beginning, 2x2 or Weave-O-Matic? I have both. What size dog, Melinda? It will depend, because I do like Weave-O-Matics. But I think that you can use two. Try the 2x2s for sure, and see how that goes. Because like I said, it really depends on the dog. If you have a dog who's not a huge thinker and is more of a doer, I think 2x2s are wonderful for that, right? I just happen to have dogs that tend to be real big thinkers. Sarah, which method do you prefer? Sarah, I just lost your question. Oh my gosh, you guys have a ton of questions. I'm very, very excited. Sarah, let me see if I can come back and find you here. I apologize, you guys. Betty, my boy drives so hard through the poles, he sometimes breaks the poles. Any suggestions? Wow. Okay, so that's a dog that does not respect their body. And at that point, I would be putting up some fencing or some gates. Give that a try. That would be my suggestion on that one. Definitely. Cindy, I used a combination method and have... let's see, have I think an 8-pound toy poodle. How far apart would you place poles to make the channels? You know what? So when I'm starting with the channels, I start wide and then I start to bring them in, and I don't move them any more than an inch to a half an inch at a time, just to let you know that. Let's see. Delisa. Ooh, I like your name. Hi, Lisa. I really like all the information on the seminar with some connection problem, but it could be from the beginning. Delisa, sorry you had the connection problems, but I'm so glad you love the information. Okay, Vanessa, how do you train entries? It depends on the dog. And using the clock method, but I find myself having to lure her into place. Okay, so Vanessa, that is something that we're definitely going to talk about in the 30 days of weed pole training. So it sounds like you're having trouble getting your dog to drive into those weaves. And so that usually comes from a dog that is not confident. And we definitely work on that, because one of the main things is we want to get a confident dog, definitely. Lisa, hi, Lisa. How do you do the channel and wire method without equipment? That is, what advice do you have for backyard trainers who have just stick in the ground poles? Hey, if you have just stick in the ground poles, you are to a great start. So definitely what you do is you would then, with the stick in the ground poles, for the channels, keep them apart. You can also use some inexpensive plastic guide wires. As a matter of fact, I have some. So Lisa, why don't you reach out to me? Because I'm more than happy, if you pay shipping, you can have the ones that I have, mainly because I now have some metal ones. So how's that sound? Karen, how do you phase out the wires? Great question, Karen. What I actually do is I start with the middle ones and I start to pull those up. And again, got to give kudos to Ann Brow on that one. That was her, her idea, and it's been fabulous. Susie, my dog weaves fast at home, but not at trials. How can you help? Okay, so Susie, it's actually not a weed pole question, surprisingly, but it has to do with weed poles. What I would actually do is As soon as my dog did the weed pulls in a trial, because normally what this means is they're feeling a bit of pressure. As soon as they did those weed pulls and completed them, I would be throwing a party. I would leave the ring and I'd be going and giving my dog some rewards. That will make one heck of an impact on them. And then suddenly they'll be like, oh my gosh, I think these weed pulls are just as exciting in competition as they are at home. Sarah, which method do I prefer to work on for footwork? Weave-o-matics. I think a dog that does not understand footwork, Weave-o-matics are wonderful. Lisa, how do you handle weaning off the guide wires? Yep, definitely. Just push them up. This way they're out of view, but they're still sort of in play. And that's definitely how I do the guide wires. GV, what is the best method for dogs that think? I think that for thinking dogs, I like a method that really starts off with driving down in the beginning. So I would say the channel method or the Weave-o-matics would be my choice on that. Gail, what do you suggest for a dog that can work independently from all distances at home, but needs encouraging clapping at a trial because of ring stress? Ring stress is a really big thing. So what I would do is I would start with something really, really simple, but I think that surprising a dog at a trial with, you did it, guess what? We're leaving right here, right now to go get that reward really breaks up the monotony for them. And I have found that that is the way to really break a dog from ring stress is suddenly you take the pressure off and you're rewarding something that they did well. How to fix when a dog, oh gosh, sorry, I missed that question again. You guys are moving fast here. What about a dog that won't weave at a trial, but does great in multiple other environments? I would definitely, so Pam, are they not weaving at all or they don't weave on the first try? So I think that number one, video yourself because you want to see whether you're doing something different, you're acting different, something along those lines. But also, as soon as that dog weaves, like I said, give up that run, go make a difference in a dog and surprise them. Belinda, thank you, thank you. I do understand and have trained 2x2s and want to change. Ooh, see? Nikki, what height for an 11-inch dog on the guide wires? Shoulder height, yes. So for all dogs, you definitely want to do shoulder height. Now, here's the other thing that I've learned about with guide wires, guys. As my dogs get better at moving through the weeds with the guide wires and they get more confident, sometimes they tend to drop lower as they get more confident. So be prepared. You may have to drop those wires just a little bit as your dog gets more confident. Robin, my larger dog wants to walk through weaves and not plant feet side to side. Help. So I say your dog at this point, it seems like they're focusing on what's right in front of them, and you need them to surprisingly lift their head just a little bit to be driving down toward the horizon. So you want to get that driving down toward the horizon part. Okay, that's what I would be doing. So possibly the channels or the Vsets will help with that because the Vsets might be a really good option, although channels as well, because it takes away that center part and moves it out to the sides. How do you handle dogs running past an entrance? So that definitely is something we're going to cover in the 30 days of weed pull training because they could be stressed. They may not even understand truly what they're doing. They haven't learned yet to collect themselves so that they can make the weed pulls. There's lots of things that could be going on there, and we definitely start with all of them. But I think what you really want to do is you want to create such a love for the weed pulls that the dogs are like, yeah, I got this. I know what you want. I love to do this. Therefore, I will. All right, Brenda, I had one instructor teach me the recalled dog through to me with a treat high and drop that down so the dog would, and it looks like it got cut off. I think that's great. The hard part on that one is what happens when you're at the entrance and not at the exit. So if you can take that same training and kind of adjust it so that your dog still goes down all the way to the end, I think that's wonderful. Judy, is there a use for targets? Yes and no. I think targets are wonderful things to get the dog's attention, and then what I like to do is I've seen some really savvy dogs that they won't do something unless the target is down there. So you want to make it very quickly so that the dog just does the activity and then the target will also appear. That's where that lotus ball really comes in handy, because you can throw it. So the dog has to offer the behavior and then the reward comes in response to them offering the behavior. I think that's very, very important. But for a young dog to get started, to drive down, targets are wonderful to get them an idea of what it is you're looking for. Michelle, what age is it okay to start introducing actual weaves for a border collie? We've been doing foundation work now. I don't actually pull my weed pulls together until the dog is both physically and mentally mature. So my young dog right now literally just turned 3 last week, and I just started training the weed pulls 3 weeks ago. I am not one. He's also mentally a bit slower to mature. He's a boy, right? And his whole litter, they're just slower to, to get their brains together. And that's okay, because they're the most loving dogs. And I'm okay waiting. So I've done all my foundation work. So once I got my foundation work, once his brain and body was done developing and growing, like I said, it took me less than a week to put those weed pulls together. So don't be in a hurry to rush, get your foundation in. Sarah, which method do you prefer to work on their footwork? I may have answered that already. Weave-o-matics. Opinion on automatic dispensers. You know what, Carrie? I love automatic dispensers. I have, many dogs that it works great for, and it's great for retraining, right? Plus, when you're training by yourself, an automatic treat dispenser is a lovely thing. Lauren says, my dog destroyed the lotus. Yeah, but you got to take it away from them before they do that. I'm just teasing you. Brenda is asking, lower head to get treat and keep head down. Absolutely. The lower the head is below the shoulders, the more stable that dog is. And that's really what you want in their performance. Joan, what about treat and train for reward at the end? Absolutely. Love the treat and train, especially when you're working on your own. Lori says, yes, I love a giveaway. Diane, is something like a manners minder good for using a target? Absolutely. Absolutely. I love how you guys are thinking here, right? Use the tools you have. Where can we find the foundation exercises? So Sue, the foundation exercises will be in the 30 days of weed pull training. I'm definitely offering that. And as a reminder, 30 days, incredibly interactive Facebook group. There's going to be videos, questions, office hours. I'm going to be doing Facebook Lives, right? So you get 30 days of training, and it doesn't matter whether you're brand new to weed pull training or you're looking from challenges. We're going to address it all. 30 days for $49.25. Normally, this is $197, but you know what? Let's keep talking, because this is fun. All right, I made channels out of 1-inch PVC, but the PVC on the ground seems to interfere with the dogs. Yeah, it depends sometimes with the dog on that one. I know it can definitely be a challenge. Lori's asking, do I ship to Canada? Is that max 200? I believe, yes, max 200 ships internationally. So yes, definitely. Pam, the lotus ball Velcro tends to wear out rather quickly. Oh my gosh, I love this, Pam, because I'm having trouble with Velcro that won't wear out quickly. Sandra, are you aware of the four-pole method? I am. I don't know enough of that method to incorporate it. I've seen it. I've actually watched a couple of YouTube videos on it, and there were a couple of things, and it just could be the YouTube video that I was watching that didn't fit in the criteria for what I was looking for personally. However, I say all this because I'm always open to learning new methods. Absolutely. And so I probably will revisit that at some point in the next year. Franna, have you tried using a ladder with, oh gosh, Franna, I'm so sorry. Hang on. I'm going to find this one again because it was great. Where did Franna's message go here? Franna, you may have to bring that one back. I apologize. Karen C. So Karen's saying, I don't see how to register for the class. It should be in the upper right hand of your screen on there. I will go back and make sure that it's truly there. I've got a red, so it says it's in there. So check up on your screen for that one. If not, go ahead and email me. I will make sure you get a link. You can email me at agility1, O-N-E, so one spelled out, at gmail.com. Let's see. Lisa, I have a super handler focused dog, a small dog. Any advice on building independence? Yeah, you've definitely got to get the placement of the reward away from you and down onto that horizon, definitely. Julie's asking wire dependence. I'm not sure if your dog is wire dependent, or I'm not sure what that question is, Julie. If you can go ahead and ask me that one again. Let's see. Sue, quick off the cuff, should be having trouble with entries. I have 2x2 gates and weave guides. My question got cut off. Okay, so you're having trouble with entries. So yeah, we're definitely going to be working on that, but you can put your 2x2s together and work just 6 pulls on your entries. And I would be using the gates for that. That's always a good one. Pros and cons of gates. I started with 12 pulls and use gates for the whole 12 pulls. Looks like you're only using gates for entry training. Meriday, you know what? I did only use it in the picture that I had. I did only use it for the entry training. However, I have used it for the full 12 pulls in the past. I've just kind of gone to the wires, which are very similar to the gates. But yeah, you definitely can do it for that as well. Okay, Becky, home performance versus trial performance, how to help out. Confidence, that's going to be the big thing. Confidence and consistency. Carol, what height for guide wires? Shoulder height of your dog. Gail, how do I help a dog that is independent from all angles and distance at home, but stresses at trials and needs clapping and encouragement? You know, interesting, Gail. We're going to definitely talk about that in the 30 days to weed pull training, because what I end up happening sometimes is we change what we're doing and we tend to come in to help our dogs. And sometimes when we do that, our dogs offer us less and less and less. So we're going to talk about in the 30 days how we can always be rewarding our dogs appropriately so that they're offering behaviors and then we get stuff for it. Maggie says, thank you, Maggie. Melinda says she's got an Aussie. Melinda, let me come back to that question. Megan, I'm teaching using 2x2s, and when the poles are almost straight, my dog single steps, but as soon as the poles are completely straight, he goes to double striding. Any suggestions for keeping the single stride? You know, it sounds like your dog is still learning how to weave. So here's what I would say at this one. I would say, see how this one goes. Once you've got those poles all together and your dog is consistently doing it and confident, she may get his single stride back. But I would say right now, if it's paired with every time you make a change, just kind of go with it just a little bit. Don't worry about it. You can always come back. Okay, let's see. Thank you so much. Someone says they're only at home with 6 poles. You know what? If you've only got 6 poles, you do with what you can. So Trudy says that she'd like to sign up for the class, but there's a terrible connection. Hey, Trudy, I'll be sending out an email to you guys too. How's that sound? Because yeah, I totally get it. Sometimes it happens that way. All right, what age do you ask for actual weaving action? Depends on the dog physically and mentally, their maturity level. Cassidy, is a Boston a decent size, too small to get a single stride? I would say it would be pretty darn questionable because that dog would have to literally be able to do 24 inches. And I think that's going to be a stretch for a Boston. but it really depends on the dog, and it depends on their motion forward as well. You're more than welcome to send me a video. This one I'd like to see as well. So Kirsten, let's see. Don't forget to look at the chat sidebar for the link to join. Okay, guys, that's where it's at, in the link sidebar. Julie, I've got a puppy starting weaves with and a 4-year-old I'm currently competing with. That's awesome. How very fun. And Julie's asking, can you help me with both in the interactive group? Oh, absolutely. So this group it's made for all levels. Those who are brand new, don't even have weed pulls, all the way up to those who want challenges. You bet, Julie, I've got you covered. Kathleen, I have an old English sheepdog who is slow going through the poles. Should I try retraining with channels? I would. And Kathleen, I've also seen the Weave-O-Matics work really, really good with dogs like that as well. All right, guys, I need to start wrapping this up because you guys have been absolutely fantastic. So first of all, don't forget to look in your chat. You can go ahead and sign up for the 30 days, the interactive coaching experience. It'll be live on Facebook with videos, exercises, all kinds of things. Also, once that is done, everything is going to be then moved into a classroom fashion where it'll be nicely organized as well. And as additional material is added over the next, years as I continue to improve on this, then you will also have access to that as well. I have got to say, you guys have been absolutely fantastic. I just cannot thank you enough. Thank you so much, you guys. If you have any questions, again, you are more than welcome to go ahead and email me personally at agility1@gmail.com. I'm happy to help all of you, and I definitely can do that in the 30 days of We Pull training, and I can't wait to see all of you there. You guys have a wonderful time. Thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. This has been so much fun. And I will see you guys in the Facebook group. Thank you so much, everybody.